You're driving home, it's late, the roads are empty, the streetlights are flashing past in that hypnotic rhythm, and you're not speeding, you're not swerving. You've got your seatbelt on, everything is fine. Then you see them, blue lights in the rearview mirror, your heart does that thing where it skips and then doubles. You pull over, you turn off the engine, you put your hands on the wheel like everyone says you're supposed to, and the officer walks up, but here's where it gets strange. They don't say anything. No, do you know why I pulled you over? No license and registration. Just silence. They stand at your window, flashlight aimed somewhere between your face and your back seat, and they wait. 10 seconds. 20. Almost a minute. And your brain starts screaming, what did I do? Did I run a light? Is there something in the back seat I forgot about? Why aren't they talking? Right now, something is happening that most people don't even notice until it's already working on them. The silence isn't random. It's not awkwardness. It's not the officer being distracted or tired. And if you don't understand what's really going on, that silence can cost you in ways you'd never expect. So here's my question to you, before we go any further. Have you ever been pulled over and the officer just stood there, quiet, watching? Say yes in the comments if that's happened to you, or say never noticed, I'll wait. But here's the thing most people get wrong. Most people think that silence is neutral, that it's just a gap in the conversation, that the officer is probably running your plates or writing something down or just being rude. That's what most people think, but that's not what's actually happening. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why police officers use silence as a tool. You're going to learn the psychology behind it, the training that teaches it, and most importantly, what you should and should not do when the quiet shows up at your window. This isn't theory. This is based on real case law, behavioral psychology, and interviews with former law enforcement. Stay with me, because this next part matters. Let's rewind to the moment those lights come on. You've already made your first mistake without realizing it. And no, it's not reaching for your license too fast or forgetting to turn on your interior light. The mistake is emotional. You're already in a state of heightened anxiety. Your heart rate is up. Your breathing has changed. Your brain has shifted into something called threat detection mode. And here's the part nobody talks about. The officer knows that. They've been trained to recognize it before they even step out of their cruiser. They can see your brake lights flicker nervously. They can see you fumbling. They can see if you're looking in the rearview mirror too much or not enough. And when they walk up to your window, they're not just checking for violations. They're reading your emotional state like a book. But the silence, that's where the real reading happens. Here's what the research says. In behavioral analysis, silence creates what psychologists call an information vacuum. When people are faced with silence, they have an almost uncontrollable urge to fill it. It's uncomfortable, it's unnatural, and in a high-stakes situation like a traffic stop, that discomfort turns into a flood of words you never meant to say, admissions you never intended to make, nervous laughter, over-explaining, volunteering information that was never asked for, and that, right there, is the point. When a police officer stays silent during a stop, they are not being rude, they are not confused, they are running a psychological script that has been refined over decades. They are waiting for you to hang yourself with your own tongue. And most people do. Let me give you a real example. A few years ago, a driver in Ohio was pulled over for a minor license plate light issue. The officer approached, stood at the window, and said nothing for nearly 45 seconds. The driver, a middle-aged man with no criminal record, immediately started talking. I just came from work. I know my registration is in the glove box. I had a beer like 2 hours ago, but just one. I'm not drunk or anything. You can check. The officer hadn't asked about alcohol, hadn't asked about registration, hadn't asked anything. But the silence had already done its job. The driver voluntarily admitted to consuming alcohol, which gave the officer probable cause for a field sobriety test. The driver passed, thankfully. But he spent 20 minutes on the side of the road, terrified, because he couldn't handle the quiet. Now contrast that with a different driver in a nearly identical situation in Florida. Officer approaches. Silence. The driver sits there, hands on the wheel, looking forward, breathing slowly. He doesn't say a word. After about 30 seconds, the officer finally speaks. Do you know why I pulled you over? The driver says, No, sir, I don't. That's it. No explanation. No nervous chatter. The officer runs his license, finds nothing wrong, and issues a warning for the light. The whole stop lasts 4 minutes. Same silence. Completely different outcome. So why does the silence work so well on most people? Because we are socialized from birth to treat silence as a problem to be solved. In normal conversation, when someone stops talking, we assume they're waiting for us to respond. We fill the gap. We keep the social machinery moving. But a traffic stop is not a normal conversation. It's a legal encounter with potential consequences, and the rules are completely different. Here's the psychological trigger that officers are counting on. It's called the principle of reciprocity mixed with uncertainty reduction. You feel that you've been given an opportunity to explain yourself, even though no question was asked. You feel that if you just say the right thing, the officer will like you, and the situation will end faster. That is a trap. A very polite, very effective, completely legal trap. But wait, let me be extremely clear about something. This is not a video about hating the police. This is not about conspiracy theories or claiming that every officer is trying to trick you. Most traffic stops are routine. Most officers are professionals doing a difficult job. But understanding the psychology of silence is not anti-police. It's pro-awareness. It's the difference between being a nervous talker and a calm, informed citizen. And that difference matters. Because here's what else the research shows. Officers themselves are trained to use silence not just for gathering information, but for safety. When an officer approaches a vehicle, they have no idea who you are or what you might be capable of. The silence gives them time to scan your car, to see your hands, to look for weapons, drugs, or unusual movement. If you're talking non-stop, you're not reaching for a gun. That's true. But you're also not listening, and a calm, silent driver is actually less threatening to an experienced officer than a nervous, word-vomiting one. Let me say that again because it's important. A calm, silent driver is less threatening. Most people think that talking will humanize them, that if they just explain they're a good person with a job and a family and no criminal intent, the officer will relax. But the opposite is often true. Excessive talking reads as anxiety. Anxiety reads as unpredictability. Unpredictability reads as a potential threat. The silence you're so desperate to break, the officer is comfortable in it. They've been trained to be comfortable in it. The question is, can you be comfortable in it too? Now let's talk about the legal side, because this is where things get even more interesting. You have rights during a traffic stop. The Fifth Amendment gives you the right to remain silent, not just after an arrest, during the stop itself. You are not legally required to answer questions like where are you going, or have you been drinking, or are there any drugs in the car? You are required to identify yourself in most states. You are required to provide license, registration, and proof of insurance. But the small talk, the fishing expedition questions, you can politely decline to answer. But here's the catch. Most people don't know how to do that without sounding guilty. And the silence strategy exploits that gap. The officer stays quiet. You feel awkward. You start talking. You waive your rights without even knowing it. Every word you volunteer can be used against you. And the courts have consistently ruled that silence before an arrest is not an invocation of your rights. You have to actually say you're remaining silent, but you don't have to say much else. Let me give you the wrong way versus the right way in real time. Wrong way. Officer walks up. Silence. You say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry if I was speeding. I know I was going a little fast back there, but everyone else was too. I'm just trying to get home to my kids. My license is in my wallet. Hang on. I promise I'm not on anything. Do you want me to step out?" Everything after "I'm sorry" is unnecessary. You've admitted to speeding. You've made an excuse. You've mentioned kids to generate sympathy. You've mentioned not being on drugs, which immediately raises the question of why you'd bring that up. You've offered to step out, which you never have to do without an order. All of this from silence. Right way, officer walks up, silence. You keep your hands on the wheel. You wait. If the silence stretches beyond what feels reasonable, you can say one thing. Just one. "Good evening, officer. I'm going to keep my hands on the wheel here. How can I help you?" That's it. Polite, cooperative, and it puts the ball back in their court. They have to state why they stopped you. They have to start the conversation. You've broken the silence without incriminating yourself. See the difference? The wrong way is a flood. The right way is a single sentence that invites them to do their job. Now here's a pattern that very few people know about. Experienced officers will sometimes use silence at specific moments to test for deception. For example, after you hand over your license and registration, they'll look at the documents, look at you, and then just stop talking. They're watching your face. Are you breaking eye contact? Are you sweating more now than you were 30 seconds ago? Are you starting to explain something that doesn't need explaining? Deceptive people, according to training manuals, overcompensate in silence. Honest people tend to wait. But here's the problem with that. Honest people also get nervous. Honest people also have anxiety disorders. Honest people also have had bad experiences with police before. So a technique that's supposed to detect deception often just detects fear. And fear is not evidence. But fear can lead to consent. You might consent to a search of your vehicle just to end the silence. You might agree to step out. You might agree to answer questions you should never answer. All because the quiet felt unbearable. That's why understanding this is so important. Not so you can be combative, not so you can play games, but so you can stay grounded. So you can recognize the silence for what it is, a tool, and you can choose not to be manipulated by it. Let me take you inside the mind of an officer for a second. I've spoken to retired state troopers and former highway patrol officers for research on this. They'll tell you openly that silence is taught in the academy. Not as a trick, but as an observation technique. One trooper told me, "If I stay quiet for 30 seconds, I learn more about the driver than 5 minutes of questions. The nervous ones talk. The drunk ones get defensive. The ones hiding something will start lying before I even ask. The calm ones, they're either completely innocent or very well trained. And either way, they're easier to deal with." Notice what he said. The calm ones are easier to deal with. Not suspicious. Easier. That's the takeaway most people miss. You do not have to be silent to be calm. You do not have to be rude to be quiet. You just have to stop treating the silence like an emergency. But here's where it gets even more subtle. Sometimes the silence isn't strategic at all. Sometimes the officer is genuinely running your plates or writing notes or waiting for backup or just having a bad night. And if you overreact to that silence, if you assume every quiet moment is a trap, you can create problems that weren't there. You can appear paranoid. You can appear hostile. You can escalate a routine stop into something much worse. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know when the silence is a tactic versus when it's just nothing? The answer is you don't. And that's the point. You don't need to know. Your behavior should be the same either way. Hands on the wheel, mouth closed unless spoken to. Polite responses when asked. No volunteering. No nervous laughter. No filling the void. Because whether the silence is strategic or accidental, the smart move is exactly the same. Let me give you a step-by-step breakdown of exactly what to do if you're pulled over and met with silence. Step 1. Pull over safely. Turn on your interior light if it's dark. Keep your hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Do not reach for anything. Do not dig for your license. Wait. Step 2. When the officer approaches, do not turn your head dramatically. A slow, obvious look toward the side mirror is fine, but keep your body facing forward. Sudden movements are what get people hurt, not silence. Step 3. If the officer stands there without speaking, let them. Count in your head. 5 seconds. 10, 15, 20. It will feel like forever. That's the anxiety talking. Your heart will pound. Your palms might sweat. That's normal. Do not let it turn into words. Step 4. If the silence goes beyond what feels reasonable to you, usually around 20 to 30 seconds, you can break it with a simple, calm, non-informational statement. Good evening, officer. My hands are on the wheel. I have my license and registration ready whenever you're ready. That's not answering a question. That's not admitting anything. That's just announcing your compliance and asking them to proceed. Step 5. Once the officer speaks, answer only what is asked. Do not elaborate. Do not explain. Do not justify. Do you know why I stopped you? No, sir, I don't. Have you been drinking tonight? No. Where are you coming from? That one is optional. You can say, I'd prefer not to answer that, or you can say from work without specifics. But remember, you are not required to give your travel history. Step 6. If the officer asks you to step out, step out. Do not argue. Do not refuse a lawful order. You can argue it later in court. On the side of the road, you comply. But you still don't have to answer questions, even outside the car. Step 7. If you are asked to consent to a search, say clearly and politely, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That is your right. They may search anyway if they have probable cause, but you do not help them. You do not say okay or sure or I guess so. You say no, and you say it calmly. Now here's the part that might surprise you. Some officers will use silence after you decline a search. They'll stand there, they'll look at you, they'll wait. They're hoping you'll change your mind. They're hoping the awkwardness will make you cave. Most people do. Oh, well, I guess you can take a quick look. I have nothing to hide. That is a disaster. That is how evidence gets found. Not because you had anything, but because you gave permission you didn't have to give. Do not be most people. Let me bring this back to the bigger picture. The reason silence is such a powerful tool in traffic stops is the same reason it's powerful in negotiations, interviews, and interrogations. Human beings hate uncertainty. We will do almost anything to resolve it. We will talk. We will confess. We will agree. We will hand over our rights, all to make the quiet stop. And the people on the other side of that silence, they know that. They are trained to use it, not because they're evil, because it works. But here's what you have that most people don't. Awareness. You're watching this video, you're learning the pattern. You're seeing the invisible script that runs underneath the surface of a traffic stop. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The next time those blue lights come on, you will not be a nervous talker. You will not be a victim of the information vacuum. You will sit there, hands on the wheel, breathing slowly, and you will let the silence be silent. That is not defiance. That is not disrespect. That is composure. And composure is the single most valuable thing you can bring to any encounter with law enforcement. So here's my final question for you. After watching this, do you think you could stay silent for 30 seconds during a traffic stop? Not hypothetically. Really. With your heart racing and an officer at your window, could you do it? Answer honestly in the comments. And if you've got a story about a time silence was used on you during a stop, share that too. Because the more we talk about this, the less mysterious it becomes. And the less mysterious it becomes, the more control you keep. One last thing before you go. This video is not legal advice. It's awareness. If you want to know your specific rights in your state, talk to a lawyer. But the psychology? That's universal. Silence is not random, it's not harmless, and it's not something to fear. It's something to understand. Now you understand. This response is AI generated for reference only. Thanks for watching, stay safe, stay calm. And next time someone goes quiet, you'll know exactly why.